Okay, thank you.
If you could raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today in the matter of the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please take a seat, say, and spell your first and last name.
My name is James, last name Bernie, B-E-R-N-I.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a special agent in the FBI.
Where are you assigned?
I'm assigned to the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division, specifically the FBI's CAST, C-A-S-T unit.
What is the FBI's CAST unit?
So CAST, which stands for Cellular Analysis Survey Team, it's a team stood up by the FBI in 2009 after the FBI noticed an increased use of cell phone records in criminal trials. So CAST team members like myself specialize in both historical and active cell phone mapping and tracking.
How long have you worked for the CAST team?
I started doing CAST work in 2015 and became a full certified member in 2016, so approximately 8 years.
What does it, tell us first of all a little bit about your educational background.
Yeah, so I graduated from Auburn University with a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice.
And prior to working at the FBI, did you work anywhere else?
I did 10 years active duty in the United States Army.
What did you do for the United States Army?
So the last 6 years I spent in the intel community working at the National Security Agency, where my job was to track Department of Defense high-value targets in Iraq using their communication devices like cell phones and satellite phones.
Tell the court a little bit about your specialized training in the field of cellular devices.
Yeah, so as a CAST team member, we receive about 400 hours of specialized training in our initial training. Everything from radio wave theory, how does a radio wave move through space. We also get training directly from the cell phone manufacturers. So Apple, Samsung, Google, they come in and teach us how their devices work. But some of the best training we receive is also from the cell phone providers, meaning AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, what used to be Sprint. They come in and teach us how does their network operate and how does a phone operate within their network. So the time you hit the green button to place a call, how does the cell phone providers keep records for all of your activities? How would we use those to track an individual or a device to historical or active locations?
How many investigations have you conducted using historical cellular telephone data analysis and cell phone location data and GPS location data?
So this has been my full-time job since 2019. So every day I look at cell phone records. I handle all the Amber Alerts for Georgia and also half of the ones for Alabama and the Panhandle of Florida. So I look through thousands of records a year, and probably within those 8 years, on average, close to 1,000 records a year.
I'm going to hand you two exhibits. The first one is States Exhibit 274. Do you recognize States 274?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What is it?
It is my CV.
And the state would move to admit States 274.
No objection. 274 is admitted.
The next one is States 275. What is States 275?
275 is a printout copy of my analysis for this case.
And the state would move to admit States 275.
No objection. 275 is admitted.
And Judge, we have 275 on a PowerPoint, and we're going to display 275 in PowerPoint mode for the court. And what we'll do at the end of the day, because our disk, our thumb drive got corrupted, which had both FBI PowerPoints on it, but at the end of the day, we will reburn both FBI PowerPoints. So that would be Special Agent Jamie Hipkiss and Special Agent Jay Burney onto one thumb drive and just move to admit the PowerPoints for the record so that they can be part of the record.
We won't have any objection to that.
So first then, have you previously been qualified before as an expert in the fields of historical cellular telephone data analysis and historical telephone location data and GPS data?
I have.
Approximately how many times have you been qualified as an expert in those fields?
About 98 different times in 9 different states.
Okay. And would that also include, have you qualified before as an expert in the superior courts of the state of Georgia?
Yes.
And have you also qualified as an expert in said matters in federal court?
Yes, ma'am.
The state would move to qualify, or excuse me, the state would submit Special Agent Burney as an expert in the fields of cellular historical telephone data analysis, cellular telephone location data, and GPS location data.
Wouldn't she be allowed to testify as an expert expert in those areas.
And the word I was looking for was tender. We would tender him as an expert.
Very well.
Thank you.
Except that, is there an objection, or do you want to inquire any further? Okay.
I want to talk to you about your analysis in this case. What were you asked to do in this case, and what did you do?
So I was asked to review several cell phone records for several different phones, also extraction location history for several different devices, and also the extraction history for a Garmin GPS watch.
So, your slide number 2, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this just, again, says that I was asked to review specifically these 2 phone records as target phones in this investigation, as they were involved in the homicide of Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia on February 22nd of 2024. And then it discusses the methodology, and that's basically using the call detail records, or the phone bill of a phone plus some additional information listed in the call detail records, putting that together with a tower list. And that allows us to get a general location of where a device is when it has an activity on the network.
And the conclusions we'll discuss as we go along the way. But before we move on, the phone number in blue, 770-778-49. Provider.
Yeah, that device was associated with Laken Riley, and that is operated by Verizon.
And the number in red, 34735.
Yeah, that device was associated to Jose Ibarra, and that is operated by T-Mobile.
What are we looking at in slide 3?
Yeah, so this is just various cell phone towers. The most common are the ones on the left-hand side, the monopole, the lattice work. But then we also show the structural tower on the bottom left down there. Again, those are antennas, those white vertical-looking things. That's what your phone connects to route its call or data sessions through there. Everything on the right-hand side is also a cell phone tower. We show that just to say, just because you don't see a tall monopole or lattice work tower in your area, doesn't mean there's not cell phone antennas providing coverage in your area.
Slide 4, 5, it's 4, sorry.
Yeah, so cell phone towers, again, are the connection between our device and what we want to do on the network. So we can also connect our phones via Wi-Fi, and we do that. But everything we're going to look at today is from records from the cell phone providers. So these records will show the connection between the cell phone device and the tower itself. And in those records, it lists the cell phone tower, the number of the tower that's used, plus the side or the sector that was also used to carry that call or activity. So what we see here in this is basically, again, the vast majority of cell phone towers, about 95% of all towers in the United States are 3-sided towers. So what we see here on the left-hand side is the cell phone tower in the middle. That's that triangle shape in the middle. And so the providers, in order to provide more space for users, they take one tower and they divide it up into 3 equal parts. And you see that here kind of on the left-hand side. You see sector or side number 1 is the red side, sector is side number 2, blue, and the third one being green. But when we get the records and we look at the actual activity on the device, we can then map that activity and show which sector. So in the middle there kind of shows when we see which tower was used for the device and which side or sector, we can then put left or right limits to each of those sides or sectors to help annotate it on the map.
What is timing advance data?
So in addition to the call detail records or kind of the phone bill with tower information, there's other records kept by a service provider, and those are what we call timing advance records. So I just talked about how a service provider puts in a cell phone tower in an area to provide coverage in that area. And then in order to provide more spots for users, they divide that one tower into 3 equal parts. But then to get even more users, what they do is for each of those sectors, those antennas, your phone doesn't use that antenna for the entire period it's on a phone call. It's giving it a time slot. Meaning, when I leave the court today and I call my wife to tell her I'm on my way home, no matter how long my call is, my phone will only use a tower for a short period of time. So it might transmit data for 5 milliseconds, then someone else's phone, then someone else's phone, then my phone comes back on top for another 5 milliseconds to transmit data. So, and those are kind of like appointment times on the tower. So what timing advance is the synchronization of the network, meaning if all the phones tried to reach the tower at exactly the same time, nothing would happen, right? Interference, everybody kind of crashes together. So they make appointment times. in order for your phone to reach its appointment time, it has to know how far away it is from the tower. So if a phone is right underneath the tower, in order to meet its appointment time, it can send its signal really close to that appointment time. But if that device is a mile away or a half mile away, it has to send its signal earlier to reach its appointment time at the right time. So the network syncs all of its devices, and in doing so, determines an approximate distance that the device is away from the tower. Advanced records are. Some things to note about timing advanced records is it's not reliant upon the user doing anything. So the phone just has to be on the network. It can be in my pocket, it can be on the table. It doesn't require me to place a phone call, text message, or data session.
And is that how the timing advanced data in some ways is different than a regular CDR?
Yes,
with cell site tower location?
Yes. So
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the two big difference between the call detail records, again, that's like the phone bill with the tower information, versus the timing advance. So the CDRs are reliant upon activity on the device. So for me, if you're looking at my records, on the CDR, you're only going to see when I place or receive phone calls, text messages, or have some kind of billable data. But on timing advance, you're going to see my phone checking in all the time with the network. Sometimes it's several times a minute, and sometimes it's every couple minutes that device is checking in with the network. And again, also with the timing advance, you're getting a general distance that the device is away from the tower.
Regardless of if you're texting or calling or doing anything with your phone just has to be on.
Correct. You can do none of those things as long as your phone is on.
Okay. Your next slide, which is slide 6.
Yeah, so another source of data that we reviewed was Garmin Watch GPS location history. So again, the Garmin watch that Ms. Riley had on was activated as a GPS tracker during a run or a physical activity. And during that, the watch was recording with GPS accuracy down to 3 to 4 meter accuracy of where the watch was the entire time during the session.
Slide number 7.
So another source of information that we had was also phone extraction information from one of Mr. Ibarra's devices. And some of that information, I think, has already been recently discussed as Samsung Rubin data. And so again, what that is the device itself, using sensors on the device, Wi-Fi location, sometimes GPS, and other things like Bluetooth, generating an approximate location of where that device is and storing that information on the device, which then can be downloaded.
Is Rubin data like timing advanced data? Does Rubin data require the user of the phone to be doing anything for Rubin data to be generated and captured by the device?
No, it does not. So the device is just generating location information based on settings on the device itself.
And how much the Rubin data in this particular case, it came from a Samsung device?
It did.
And is it the one that we said the phone number to earlier on in your presentation?
It was.
Thank you. Your next slide.
All right, so for the next couple slides, we're going to see mapped activity of the phone devices, the GPS, and the extraction Rubin data. But for each cell phone tower information, what you're going to see is this call out, what we call a call out box. So the call out box is all the information from the call detail records and the timing advance report. So at the top, it lists that unique cell ID number. So again, that's the tower number, and then the dash is the sector number. And then the date of the activity listed there in this example. And then the target phone number will be listed there. The time of the event will be listed, all in local time. And then it'll also show whether it was an incoming or outgoing call or text message. The next part there where it says 60 is the compass direction of the sector used. So remember I said a tower covers 360 degrees, a full circle. So in this instance, the phone used a sector that pointed towards 60 degrees, or basically north and east. And then the other phone number on the far right-hand side is the other number associated with this call or text. One other thing you see on there is the letters RTD. That stands for range to device. And then it says 0.34 mi, so that's 0.34 miles. So again, that's going to be a timing advance activity. So in this instance, at 2:09 a.m., the phone checked in with the network and reported an approximate distance of 0.34 miles.
And this is just a hypothetical not associated with this case?
Correct.
Just explaining how the records look?
Correct.
All right. Your next slide, page 9.
Again, these are just the devices that I was asked to review, both cell phone records, extraction, location history, and also the Garmin GPS watch.
And focusing on the T-Mobile Jose Ibarra number that we see there. So could you tell the court what different types of data did you look at for him and his device?
Yeah, so I reviewed both the call detail records, so again, the phone bill with the tower information, timing advance records from T-Mobile, and extraction location history.
Which is Rubin data.
Which is the Rubin data.
And if you could, just so we're not confused when you say that, can you just say Rubin data?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you looked at all three of those things for his location.
I did.
Thank you. Let's start with Laken Riley. Is that who slide number 11 is dealing with?
It is.
Go ahead and tell us what we're looking at here at slide number 11.
Yeah, you're on map stand and wait. Yes. All right, so each of the map slides will look approximately the same. What we'll see here is on the very top will be the date time period.
I'm just going to move this a little closer to you to make sure Madam Court can hear you. Okay.
At the top will be the date and the time period of the map. On the top left-hand portion up here will be any phones or watch information. So again, on this slide, we see it's the blue phone associated with Miss Riley and her watch. On the right-hand side here will be any locations of interest. I was given several locations of interest to compare the locations of the phones and watches to. So we have R being the Ibarra residence here. You see that yellow box here. Blue, LR is the Laken Riley residence. We see that with this blue square up here. And then the crime scene where the body was located, we have here, we see that as the red box here. So in this example, or on this slide, we're looking at 9:03 to 9:53. And this is just Laken Riley's timing advance records, call detail records, and her GPS watch. So if we look at the cell phone activity first, we see at 9:03:09, there was a timing advance report of 0.68 miles. So we get the tower, we get the sector or side of the tower, and then what we can see here is that device reported a distance of 0.68 miles. So within this tower and sector, this shaded area right here is at 0.68 miles. So we have the timing advance arc there. We have an outgoing call placed at 9:03, 35 seconds to a phone number 6550. And then the next activity is at 9:10:50. We have a timing advance arc of 0.58, which is this timing advance arc right here. At 9:11:05 a.m. is an outgoing call placed to 911. And then the next timing advance, there's several timing advance, but the next one we looked at was at 9:53:11. Same arc right here as this one before, 0.58 miles. And then a next incoming call again to that 6855.
And so go ahead.
So again, that's just the information from the phone data from Verizon in this case. What we also plotted here is the watch location. So again, when she activated her run session at approximately 9:03 a.m. in the morning, it turned that watch into a GPS tracker. So again, that watch is then constantly recording among lots of different pieces of evidence or lots of different pieces of activity about her, the location. So we could track her location as she was running down here, and at 9:06:42, she went into the woods here, and then we can see she went up, hit this trail about 9:08, and then started moving eastbound, and then about 9:09:42, took that trail that goes north and west in this location here. We'll see on the next slide here, but 9:10 to 9:31, 9:10:31 to 9:26:53, all of her GPS activity is inside of this small area where the crime scene was.
The next page then is page 12.
So this is just concentrating on the GPS locations from the Garmin watch between 9:10:02 to 9:10:36. And again, we can see the GPS moving approximately down the trail here at 9:10:36. It's right here.
The next slide, 13.
So this is the time period between 9:10:37 and 9:14:58. And again, we can see the device has numerous GPS locations all within this small area right here together there.
At some point, does her device move off the trail and closer to the box that we see called crime scene?
It does.
Next slide, 14. What does this depict?
Yeah, so at 9:15:02 is the last time the device reported in the video of the trail. Then that device is seen moving a little bit eastbound and then northbound here, where there's a lot of activity in this general area here, 9:15:20 to 9:26:53. That 9:26:53, the device has been stationary, heart rate drops now at this point, and so the GPS location history stops coming in on that device at 9:26:53.
Okay, so your last GPS location on that device is at 9:26:53.
For this time period.
And we see in the box that you have drawn there, does that mean the device is moving, or what is with all the different purple marks we see?
Yeah, so again, each of these is a Latin long associated with the GPS device. As we all know, when we use GPS to travel in a direction, when you're moving, GPS is awesome and it tells you, hey, you need to turn, and then you turn. But when you start your GPS, sometimes it thinks you're headed the wrong direction or going in this direction or that direction. So GPS, when it's not moving a whole lot, sometimes the accuracy can be a little bit less. And so some of these hits will be over here, but what we do is look at the aggregate of all of the hits together. And again, all of the hits together put that device in this general area here.
Moving on to your slide number 15.
Yeah, so again, the next several maps will be of the red phone associated with Mr. Ibarra.
So first looking at page 15, what data are you mapping here?
Yeah, so again, what we have is the data directly from this device here ending in 3978. That's a T-Mobile device. And what we have here is the timing advance. So we're looking at, again, the CDRs, which is the phone bill plus the tower information. The timing advance, so the phone just checking in with the network. And then also the Rubin data.
Okay, so all of that is here on this slide.
Correct.
And in looking at all three, or that data, all three parts of data, or all three types of data, were you able to determine at what time Jose Ibarra's mobile device left his residence?
Approximately, yes.
And what time is that?
So during this time period, we can see again, the timing advance shows the arcs of where the phone is. And we can see the Rubin data here shows 11 to 12 meter hits right here on the residence. So on this slide, you can see between 9:30 and 9:45, all of the activity is in the vicinity of the residence.
I'm sorry, you said 9, is that 9 or 6?
Correct, 6:42.
Okay, so 6:30 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. the phone is at the residence?
Yes, ma'am.
And by residence, you mean Jose Ibarra's residence?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Next slide, 17.
So what we see here is continuation 6:46 to 6:59 p.m. Again, we see the timing advance.
I'm sorry, I heard you say p.m., but I'm reading a.m.
AM, I'm sorry.
Okay, it is a.m., right?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
So what we have here again is the timing advance arcs here. So we see on the previous slide, the phone was just using one tower, one sector with one reported timing advance. Now we're seeing a lot of different timing advance arcs from two different towers here. We also start to see the Rubin data move away from the residence, which we'll see more of on the next page.
Page 18.
So again, this is just looking at the Rubin data, we kind of peeled off the timing advance arcs. And what we can see, again, is that 6:32 a.m. to 6:47 a.m., the device is in the vicinity of the Ibarra residence. And then the first activity we have away from the residence is this one here at 6:52, an 11-meter hit.
And the next one, what is the one at 6:57?
Yeah, so then at 6:57, we see a 35-meter location history here, close to what I've labeled as number 1, associated address number 1, which is 310 Rogers Road.
What is a 35-meter hit?
So what that means is the device is trying to determine the location, its location, and it's using, again, lots of different sensors. Sometimes GPS, sometimes it's using Wi-Fi locations, meaning the device senses other Wi-Fi locations and it says, hey, I see Jay's Wi-Fi location. I know where Jay's Wi-Fi is, so now I know where my device is. And so what we see is based on the signal strength from either the GPS location or the Wi-Fi locations that the device senses, it determines an error radius of the device. So it basically provides a latitude and longitude of where it believes the device is, and says that device is within an approximate distance. So in this case, that approximate distance is 35 meters.
Is it your expert opinion that that device left the Ibarra residence at 6:52 a.m. or thereabouts?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And is it your expert opinion that at 6:57 a.m. that device is near Building S, the 310 Rogers Road?
Yes, it is.
Next slide, 19.
So here we have 7 a.m. to 7:15 a.m. And again, this is both the CDR's timing advance and that Rubin data. all piled together. And so again, we see a lot of different timing advance arcs from both different towers here. And then we also see some of the Rubin data, 702, 707, and 712, which we'll see more of on the next slide.
And why are there two different arcs for the timing advance data? How does that happen?
Yeah, so again, the phone checks in to determine its distance. And in this case here, a lot of times when a device is in an area of overlap, meaning it is in an area between two different towers, it's checking in with both of those towers to determine its distance. So we see this device had check-ins from this tower located here, as we see some of these arcs here, and it's also checking in with this tower here, these arcs right there.
And is it your opinion that at this time that device is again over building S?
Yes, during some of this time period, which we'll see on the next slide.
Okay, there we go. Tell me what we're looking at, slide 20.
So again, on this slide, what we're focusing on is the Rubin data here. So we have the first check-in here is at 702 from the Rubin data, then at 707, and then that device moves southbound and reports location here at approximately 7:12 a.m.
And in between the two concentric circles that are marked 702, 707, there appears to be a blue icon there. Is that a bus stop?
It is.
Okay. And is that a bus stop outside of or near building Rogers Road, 310 Rogers Road?
It is. This is 310 Rogers Road, also referred to as Building S.
Okay, where your one is.
Correct.
Okay. So that is the bus stop in front of building S.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. What are we looking at, page 21?
So again, just a continuation here. We have 716 to 734. Again, a combination of both information from the CDRs and the timing advance, plus the Rubin data. So again, now that device, for timing advance purposes, was checking in with only one tower, and then we have a Rubin location history here at 733. So we go into more on the next slide.
Slide 22.
So again, this is between 716 and 759. These are your timing advance arcs. That device is checked in with two different towers, which to me says that there's possible movement of that device, which is supported by the Rubin location history here, which we'll see zoomed in on the next slide.
And when you say movement, what do you mean by movement?
Yeah, so if a phone is located in one area, and that one area would be, let's say, if you go back to the next slide, I can
Yes.
get more explained here. So let's say that phone was, located down here near the residence or off of this portion down here. Well, the tower that's closest to it would probably get most of the check-in. So that phone may only check in with one tower and have one timing advance arc that's stationary, right? But a lot of times when we see a device is moving, we're obviously getting multiple distances, check-ins from those devices, that the phone is checking in at multiple locations. Plus, it's pulling from a separate tower in this area here.
So page 23, is that the Rubin data again?
It is.
Okay. And how would you describe the Rubin data in relation to your number one, 310 Rogers Road?
Yeah, so again, this is between 7:16 a.m. and 8 a.m. Again, this is only the Rubin data. The first one we have here is 7:33, an 11-meter location history here. We then see that device move northbound to the area around Building S, or the associated address number 1. And we have several location histories check-in, 735, there's 2, 736, 737, 42, 747, 752, and then that device again has another location check-in at 8 o'clock down this way. So the device was in this general area here, moved up closer to Building S during this time period here, 735 to 752, and then sometime after that, up until 8 o'clock, the device is now moved again south.
So between 7:35 and 7:52, would your expert opinion be that that device is at Building S, number 1?
Yes, or very close to it. We see some of these location histories being as small as 2 meters, which again is about 7 feet.
And is this data that we see on page 23 also concordant with the timing advance data that you had shown us earlier?
It does. It matches up into the distances from the towers.
Next, screen 24.
So here we have between 8 and 8:59. Again, we see a lot of timing advance here. This would be indicative of some phone movement during this time period, a lot of different distances on each of these towers here. Plus we have this Rubin data here at 8:12, 8:17, all the way up to 8:55, which we'll see more of on the next slide.
And when you say movement, again, what do you mean by that for this particular slide, page 24?
Yeah, so again, the device, if stationary, the timing advance distance would come back as the same distance. But since we're seeing multiple distances, sometimes on the same tower, but sometimes on other towers, it means that there's been movement of this device during that time period.
And within the range that we see here on page 24.
Correct, between 8 and 9, which is also supported by the Ruben data.
Page 25.
So the Ruben data here, 8:12, 8:17, again, locations down here. 8:34, location here in the vicinity of, again, the location 1. And then 8:55, location here, a pretty large 104-meter location history there.
And for Ruben data, can you ask for specific times? Like, can you look at the phone extraction and just say, tell me, Ruben data, where was the phone at 8:24 a.m., for example? Or are you just stuck with what the phone collects?
Yeah, you just have what the phone collects and stores. So depending upon the settings on the device, things going on the device is going to store, collect, and store location history to make a better experience for the users. So we can just testify and review that information.
So from 8:01 a.m. to 8:55 a.m., there's movement again on the phone in that vicinity that we see. What happens at 8:55 a.m.?
So at 8:55 is the last part of the Ruben data. There's not going to be any Ruben data again until 9:40.
And that is a big gap. So 8:55 to 9:40, there is no Ruben data. What explains no Ruben data? How is Ruben data collected?
So Ruben data is collected through a couple different sources. One is GPS. We saw some of our hits be GPS on the last one. These 2 and 3 meters were GPS collections. Some are Bluetooth collections, but the vast majority of location history from Ruben is from Wi-Fi. So if there is a Wi-Fi and it's turned on, it's sending beacons out to phones or devices saying, hey, I'm a Wi-Fi location, here I am. Whether it's open or closed, whether you join it or not, your device sees those Wi-Fi beacons. And it says, hey, I know Jay's Wi-Fi beacon, I just saw it, because I know where Jay's Wi-Fi is, I now know where my device is. And it knows where those Wi-Fis are because it's collected through open source information. So on all of our phones, specifically Samsung or Google phones, your device is collecting location history, sending it back to the providers so that the providers can use that information to better know where you are, to provide a better experience for the phone.
Did you check and measure yourself the area of the Oconee Forest Park to see if there is any Wi-Fi in that area?
I did.
And what were your results?
There was no Wi-Fi in the area of the park.
All right, so what is our next slide here, 26?
So again, this is looking at the device associated with Mr. Ibarra, 3978, and also included the GPS locations from Riley's watch. And so what we have here is at 9 to 9:03, we have the red device is somewhere within these timing advance arcs right here. Again, at this point in time, we don't have any Ruben data like we had in all the other previous slides.
So then is that consistent, this slide, page 26? Well, let me ask it a different way. Is it your opinion that that device of Jose Ibarra's was in the forest at this time?
Yes, obviously there's no Wi-Fi to provide locations. I did test for Wi-Fi all the areas covered by this tower here and this tower here to include this vast area. The only places within that test that provided no Wi-Fi was the general area of the Oconee Forest Park.
So the fact that there's no Wi-Fi and you have no Ruben data during this time period, is that concordant with the timing advance data that we see here with the device being in the forest?
It is.
And how long were you able to determine that that device belonging to Jose Ibarra was in the forest?
Yeah, so again, the last Ruben data we saw was 8:55, and then the next one we see isn't until 9:40.
And by 9:40, has that device left the forest?
You'll see in the timing advance where that device
Okay,
is.
all right, so we'll get there then. Page 27.
So again, timing advance arcs here, plus we have Laken Riley's GPS locations here. So the timing advance for this device at 9:03, 50, and 9:51, again, put it in this spot here. Again, one thing to remember is there's still no Ruben data, which means when we tested these areas here, there was Wi-Fi everywhere except for the park, which allows us to kind of help pinpoint where the device could have been, and that would be somewhere within this portion here. And then again, we have the Riley GPS locations, and at 9:06, that device is still headed southbound.
Page 28.
So here again, 9:06 to 9:09 a.m. If we look at Riley's locations here, we see now she's moved down here, and at 9:06, she's now entering the woods here, the forest, and then her run trail takes her up and along this trail here at 9:09. What we have on the Ibarra device is again timing advanced check-ins at 9:11 or 9:09, 11 seconds, and 9:09, 56, both of which are on this timing advanced arc. Again, still no Rubin data during this time period, which allows us to say that device was most likely in the forested area somewhere along this arc.
And is it your expert opinion in looking at both Laken Riley's Garmin watch data and the timing advanced data from Jose Ibarra's phone that their two digital profiles are closing in on one another at this time?
They are.
Okay. The next slide.
So this is 9:09 to 9:12. And again, if we look at the Riley GPS here, we see at 9:09:12 it's here. 9:09:51 it made that turn to go north and west along that trail. And then we have the rest of those locations here, 9:10 to 9:12. We also have some timing advance of her device. Again, her device checking in with the network at 9:10:51. And you see that as that blue arc right here. We also have the timing advance for the 3978 red device. And so what we see here is at 9:09:56 is the first one. It's using this tower here, and we see it reports the distance at 0.58, which is the exact distance of Riley's check-in approximately 1 minute later. Here we have the device checking in using this distance right here at approximately 9:10 all the way to 9:12:08.
So during this time period that we see on slide 29, 9:09 a.m. to 9:12 a.m., are Laken Riley's digital profile and the Jose Ibarra phone, again, next to one another or on top of each other or coinciding? How would you describe it?
I would say that they are very close.
Okay. Next slide.
Again, this is a continuation, 9:13 to 9:09. Again, we already looked at Riley's GPS. We know that's all kind of in the vicinity of the crime scene during this time period. This is also where we have some timing advance off of her device, still reporting approximately the same distance at 9:17 here. And during this time period, we have the Ibarra device checking in using this tower and sector here, these arcs, at 9:13 to 9:09, with one of those during those time periods at 9:16. It's also checking in with this tower and sector here.
9:30, or excuse me, page 31, 9:20 to 9:27.
Yeah, continuation here. Again, we have looking at Riley's GPS device, 9:20 to 9:26:58. Again, 9:26:58 is the last time the device reports latitude and longitude location. And then we have her timing advance at 9:20 and 9:26. Again, that device reports this approximately the same distance, so no movement that we can see on her device. And then we have his device here, the 3978 device, again in red here, reporting in several different distances from 0.4 to 0.9 between the 9:20 and 9:20 time period, again in this arc portion right here.
Page 32.
Again, continuation, 9:30 to 9:39. Now I'm looking at just the 3978 device. And what we see here is a lot of different timing advance arcs here. Again, the first one is at 9:30:06, and it reports 0.58 miles, which is the farthest distance here. And then what we see is that device reports closer and closer and closer to the tower, meaning that device started at 9:30:06, ending at 9:39:55, was farther away and got closer to the tower, eventually using this timing advance arc here at 9:39:55. So again, I say the device was farther away from the tower and gets closer to the tower during this time period. Again, still no Rubin data from the device at 9:39.
And you've already told us at this point, Laken Riley's digital profile does not move after 9:26 a.m., is that right?
That's correct.
So how long, from what time period, and if you need to flip back to look at your report, let me know, but from what time period to what time period did Laken Riley's digital profile and the Jose Ibarra device profile overlap in the forest?
Yeah, so approximately 9:10 on, pull up the slide here. So on page 12 is where we saw the device at 9:10:02 as it traveled north and west on the trail, and getting to the area at 9:10:36, that eventually it stayed in that area and eventually moves off the trail approximately 5 minutes later. So I would say, and also based on his timing advance of where he is, plus the lack of Rubin data, I would say that the devices came in contact somewhere around the late portions of 9:10. So
Until when?
until approximately, I would say probably 9:32 is when we see his device. Again, on this slide here, we can see at 9:30 it's here. 9:30 and 53 seconds, it's now a little bit closer. 9:32:07, it's now a little bit closer. So I would say it's somewhere around the 9:30 to 9:32 time period.
And then that device, the Jose Ibarra device, is on the move at that point.
Yes, ma'am.
And in what direction does his device move, and where does it go, and at what time?
Yeah, so again, we saw on the other slide at 9:30 to 9:39, it moved far, it started farther and eventually got closer to the tower. During this time period at 9:40 to 9:50 a.m., now we have timing advance, plus now we're seeing the Rubin data again. The first location of that Rubin data is at 9:40 a.m., a 98 meter hit. And then we see 9:45, and then eventually 9:50 here. And again, that all interacts with our timing advance data we have here between 9:40 and 9:50 a.m.
And you have marked in this page 33 a D1 dumpster. What is that?
That's a location I was asked to look at as far as location information of where I think an article of clothing or something like that might have been thrown into the dumpster.
And is it consistent with the Rubin data that you have seen that that Jose Ibarra device is at that dumpster and could be at that dumpster at 9:44 a.m.?
Yes. Again, we have 9:40 here. The next location is at 9:45 here. So obviously you can see the scale of the map on the bottom between the device, the dumpster here, and this 9:45 is probably, I don't know, 70 or 80 feet distance. So yes, it's completely logical that at 9:45 the device could have been near the dumpster, but it just didn't report a location during that time. The next one we had was at 9:45.
And at 9:50 is the device back at the Ibarra residence?
It is.
And so at what time did the Jose Ibarra device leave his residence that morning on the 22nd?
Yes, so it leaves the residence. The first location we can see that it left the residence was at 6:52 a.m.
And what time does it return to the residence?
The returns back to the residence at approximately 9:50 a.m.
May I have one moment, Your Honor? I will pass the witness. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. One more thing, sorry, I forgot. At some point, did you also look at Diego Ibarra's phone and attempt to find GPS location data?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And you can have a seat for this. I think we're done with your presentation. And what were your results of looking at that?
Yeah, for the Diego devices, there was no location history from the extraction, so nothing similar to Rubin data, nor did we have, that device wasn't on the network, so there was no CDRs or timing advance available because that device was not hooked up to the network.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to start right where you left off there with Mr. Diego Ibarra's device. So we don't really have any information on where that device was located on the relevant time period.
We do not. Again, there's no CDRs, no timing advance. That device, I think, was not activated on the network on like the 10th or 12th of February.
I want to talk about some general questions and then we're going to go to some slides. So my first question is, timing advance data depends on someone having cellular service. Is that true?
It does.
So if someone had turned off their cellular service for any reason, such as airplane mode, that data would cease to be communicated to the tower?
That's correct.
Okay. And then for the Rubin data, that depends on a combination of GPS or Wi-Fi data.
Mostly, yes, ma'am.
And so one reason someone could stop having Rubin data would be if they turned off their Wi-Fi or GPS capabilities.
Yes.
So if someone were to put their phone on airplane mode, for example, you would see a cease of the routed data.
Potentially, yes. So again, it's not always just the Wi-Fi locations. It can also be GPS locations.
But if you turned off location services on your phone with airplane mode, that would also kind of interfere with the GPS routed data.
Not necessarily. Location services is for the user and not necessarily for the provider or the maker of the device. They still get your locations from that.
But you would agree that the Wi-Fi and collected routed data would be interfered with if someone turned off the ability of the phone to communicate via Wi-Fi.
Potentially.
So let's talk about what can affect the accuracy of these advanced timing data bands, because you kept using the term approximate. Why did you use the term approximate?
Yeah, because again, written in my report, it'll say whatever, 0.56 miles. Well, that device isn't exactly at 0.56. It depends on the technology. So for 4G, which was the technology for these devices, that error rate is 78 meters. That's why you see it as an arc and not a line. So again, they couldn't say that it's at 0.35 miles and then there's just one solid line. Well, we know that that device reports a timing advance of 0.34 miles plus 78 meters.
And for those of us that are not up to speed on the metric system, what is 78 meters approximately? How long is that?
78 meters, it's like 3.1 meters to foot. Are you trying to convert it to feet?
If you can.
Yeah, so that would be right under 240 feet. So 230 something feet
Got it.
off the top of my head.
Thank you. So I would like to go to a different point on your slide to talk about this error rate a little more. And if Judge, you need to toggle to my HDMI connection?
Is that you?
It is me, that's fine. Just one moment, Your Honor.
Or you can switch, I took this one out, you want to just plug it in there? Okay.
Maybe.
There you go.
Okay, there's an issue on my end here. Okay. So when we look at, this is slide 11 of your PowerPoint. Does that appear to be an accurate copy of slide 11?
It does.
Okay, I'm gonna full screen it so it's easier to see. So when I'm interpreting your map here, the GPS points, the actual GPS point is the point of the arrow at the bottom of the circles. Is that
It is,
fair?
correct.
And so when we look at the Garmin data versus this advanced timing band, even at the times when they overlap, you would agree with me that the Garmin data is slightly outside of the advanced timing band.
In some cases it is. So the way timing advance is generated is a signal is sent from the tower to the phone and then back to the tower. And they take the time period for that round trip of that signal and they multiply that times the speed of light. And that determines the distance. Sometimes that signal doesn't exactly go in a straight line and come back, especially when there's potential interference like buildings or a lot of trees or other things. That signal may bounce around as it reaches the phone and then bounce around and come back. And so what that potentially does is move the timing advance arc slightly farther away than the device actually is. So the device is either within the shaded area or slightly inside of that shaded area. And when I say slightly, we're talking about meters. We're not talking about 30 feet or whatever. We're talking about just inside of it.
And so one thing that can interfere with the accuracy of advanced timing data is having a lot of trees around.
It could make that timing advance arc a little bit further. Again, when I say a little, I'm talking about feet, single digits of feet, not necessarily large distances.
Sure, but you would agree with me that this forested area did have a lot of trees in it.
It does.
Can weather affect the accuracy of timing advanced data?
It really doesn't. I mean, most of those signals are picked specifically for their ability to, not be affected by them.
Okay. It's just the physical obstructions that would be in between the device and the tower that would be.
Correct, because it's based on line of sight.
All right, and then for Wi-Fi, there we have these circles of error rate, and you said it depends on the strength of the Wi-Fi. Am I correct in assuming that means if someone has a strong Wi-Fi signal that extends over a broader area, a device that connects to that Wi-Fi could be anywhere in that broader area?
So again, these are all based on algorithms inside the phone and also proprietary to Samsung. So as the phone sees the signal, it can tell, hey, most of these signals are really strong when we see this, so I know where I'm at, or hey, a lot of times this one Wi-Fi emits much farther than others, and so that could potentially change some of the distance.
I'm going to try to go now to slide 29. So this is the slide that deals with your opinions about where the devices were between 9:09 and 9:12. Does this still look to be a fair and accurate copy of your?
It does.
Okay. You expressed an opinion when talking with the state that the phone was inside the forest. The phone associated with Mr. Ibarra was inside the forest at this time.
It was based on my review of the timing events and the lack of Rubin data.
And so you based that analysis on, just like you said, on the fact that there was timely advance data, but no Rubin data.
Correct.
But as we just discussed a few minutes ago, the Rubin data could have been interfered with by a different reason.
Potentially.
If the phone had been turned on into airplane mode, it could have not been picking up Rubin data on the Wi-Fi spectrum.
Well, in airplane mode, it would have taken itself off the network, and so therefore we wouldn't have timing in advance either. So we know that the device was not taken off of airplane mode.
But if Wi-Fi was turned off, the phone.
Wi-Fi potentially could have, again, affected some of the Rubin data.
Okay. And so all we know for sure, based on the data we have available, is that the phone was somewhere in this red arc.
For sure. If you look solely at the timing advance data, yes.
You also testified that when you did a review of the Oconee Forest Park, determined if there was any Wi-Fi within the park that could be hit on.
I did.
How far into the park did you have to go before you, I guess, lost the capability of connecting to Wi-Fi?
Yeah. So we could see Wi-Fi at the edges of the park. I don't remember the exact distance, but it was it wasn't super far in there based on the terrain. If you know the terrain around in there, it obviously drops down a little bit as it goes in there. So if I had to guess a number, maybe 15 meters inside what's listed here as the park.
Okay. I think those are all questions I have for you.
Any redirect, Ms. Ross?
No, sir.
Can he be excused?
Yes, sir.
Any
No, Judge, Your
objection?
Honor.
Thank you.
Especially you're excused. That's probably going to do it for today.
May I go ahead and just finally admit States 283, which are the two PowerPoints that I discussed. On States 283 is a thumb drive that has Jay Ernie's, Special Agent Ernie's PowerPoint that we just saw, and it also contains Special Agent Hibkis's PowerPoint that was shown to the court later.
As indicated before, any objection? 283 is admitted for the two PowerPoints. That will conclude the testimony today. So I'm interested in any information that you all can give me going forward as far as time.
I suspect, Your Honor, if we proceed on our current path, and we also have several other stipulations that we get to tell the board about, but we are stipulating some other evidence, but the state will be done tomorrow. I don't know exactly what time yet, but we will rest our case tomorrow.
All right. So I say that, and I'll hear from you, Ms. Beck. I wanted to hear that because I understand that you may have some defense witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I would say have them ready.
And would Your Honor like them ready in the morning or the afternoon?
I think afternoon is safe.
Afternoon sounds like would be
Okay.
fine. And by ready, I mean here.
Yes, Your Honor. We anticipate our witnesses not, even if they went all of them and took the longest that they might go, I think it's still going to be less than half a day of testimony.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the information. It's helpful. Anything else we can do today?
No, sir, not Wednesday.
Nothing else, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you all. 8:30 in the morning.